Hey everyone, it's Ruben, and today I'm happy and proud to introduce a new video course called I Now Pronounce You. These videos will aim to help with the perfection of Portuguese pronunciation, Brazilian Portuguese. And this first one will start you off with a few tricky vowels. But before we dive in, here's how my advice and observations will be different from anything you've ever heard before. First of all, we will only focus on the sounds that give English speakers trouble. Now, there's no reason to discuss every sound in Portuguese. It's really just the sounds that you might not be able to figure out just by looking at a word. Second, even though I'm a huge language nerd, I'll try my best to avoid any technical language, including IPA. If you don't know what that is, good. You don't need it. Finally, following this framework will allow you to use words and sounds from English to help guide you to pretty awesome pronunciation. Now, they may not be exact, but I guarantee it will be a serious improvement, and I know you won't forget some of these associations. You'll already get a nice taste of what I'm talking about in the first lesson today, because I'm going to introduce some vowels that English speakers typically suck at, only focusing on the subtle differences that you may not be able to pick up without a critical eye, see? I'll show you what I mean. So Brazilian Portuguese has 12 basic vowel sounds, but a few more when you combine 2 or 3 of them. You got your basic vowels, you got your basic Latin vowels here, A, E, I, O, and U. And as you've probably realized, Portuguese has nasalized versions of each of these. By the way, nasalized is the most technical we're going to get here. All this means is that each vowel sounds like it has an NG at the end of it. And you can see here that I've used the Portuguese spelling patterns to show you these 5 nasalized vowels, and the fact that they're not always spelled with the chew, or the little squiggly line on top of them. You might find these with the letters M or N directly following the vowel, and they're exactly the same pronunciation. And what is that pronunciation? Well, I've used English spellings to show you on the right side that these are, in order from top to bottom, pronounced ang, ing, ong, and But the nasalized sounds will be something that we'll cover a little bit later in a different video. But those 5 vowels and the nasalized pairs only add up to 10. The other 2 make up possibly the trickiest vowels to master from English. You're going to see that E's and O's in Portuguese are really special and sometimes pretty tricky. For example, the letters E and O both have 2 different pronunciations. One is considered closed, which is often marked with a little hat, and the other is open, which we can sometimes identify with a regular accent going up and to the right, like in Spanish. The crappy part is that E's and O's within words don't always have accent marks to tell you if they're open or closed. So you really just have to fend for yourself. There are very few rules, but I'll show you what I mean by describing each of these individually and giving you a better idea of what they sound like independently. The first one here we have is the closed E, or the E with a little hat. And the best way to think of this is to shape your mouth like the E in English and to say A through the E. All right, shape your mouth like E and say A. You don't want to close your sound to the E sound. You don't want to say A, but to keep it simple and just focus on that first part of the vowel, A. Because if you do make that A-E sound together, A, you're going to get a different Portuguese sound, which is spelled like this next one. This is not one of the basic vowels, but just what happens when you put those 2 letters together, A. It's exactly like the English AY, as in the word day or say, and it is a specific distinct vowel in Portuguese. And I'll show you a couple words that demonstrates this difference. Here's the first one, de, and the second one, dei, de. So you can see that there is a subtle difference between the 2, and the meaning, of course, changes quite a bit. And the last E we have here is the open E, which is sometimes spelled with the little accent mark. This sound is similar to the vowels that you can find in the words bed and bad in English. It's really close to either one of those. You can just choose either one, whichever you feel comfortable with. Anything that will separate this sound from the closed A will give you a lot more confidence. In general, I would say close your mouth slightly more than you would in saying eh in English. Next we have the closed O, or the O with a little hat on top. The closed O, similar to the closed E, you're going to shape your mouth like U and say O through that vowel. So it sounds like O. make sure you don't close to the oo sound. Don't say o, because if you say o, just like you would in English, you're going to get a different sound, different spelling pattern in Portuguese, which is the combination of these two letters o and oo. It's going to be the same as the English o. If you kind of exaggerate it and say oh, you'll hear those two sounds come together. Here's a couple words that show you the difference between the closed o and the o. We have vovô and vo. Vovô, vo. Subtle differences in pronunciation, but as you can see here, pretty big differences in meaning. Lastly, we have the open O, which is the O with the accent mark. And this one is kind of like the aw sound in English. The aw as in call, always. But a good tip is to round your lips a little bit more. Another thing that works is to imitate a Brooklyn accent, a New York accent. Pronounce these three words here: coffee, talk, and water. Oh, that O sound will help you a lot with this open O if you're familiar with it. And you can pronounce this word at the bottom, ótimo, ótimo. So now that you have all those sounds, we can use some of that knowledge to kind of understand some tricks here that I've come up with using English to explain a couple words that are really common in Portuguese. He and she, ele and ela. Ele, I've thought of a trick which is to use the English word alien and to take off the N. So alien, alien, ele, ele, ele. Magic. And the second word we have here, which is Ala, we're going to use the word in English, the state of Alabama. Alabama. And take off the Bama. Ala, Alabama. Ala, Ala, Ala. Ele, Ala. It's really, really, really close. Is it perfect? Maybe not, but it is a nice trick, and it's kind of easy to remember. The last word we have at the bottom here is seu. Seu we can think of as this phrase in English, which is let's say you wanted to seu. If you say it fast enough, it really, really does sound pretty close. So use those tricks and help you memorize some of these pronunciations, especially the difference between these first two words, ele and ela. So now that we can get that down, we have some other practice here with ease. We have lots of words that are really close in spelling but have a little difference in pronunciation, which changes the meaning quite a bit. For example, this word feto and feito. Feto. Feito. Quite a difference in the meaning. The second pair we have here, two short and sweet words. The letter P is pronounced pe, and the word foot, pé. Upe, upe. Both of these masculine words, by the way, if you're still perfecting your grammar. But be careful here, because there are some words that are spelled exactly the same. Don't be fooled here. I use the capital E just to help guide you in remembering this is an open E, but these words are otherwise spelled exactly the same. And the first word is pronounced with a closed E. However, the second word is, as you can see, open. So the pronunciations here are sede, sede, and sede. Sede, sede. Let's get some practice with some O words. Similarly, got a lot of words that are spelled pretty close but have completely different meanings, and we want to work on perfecting that pronunciation. So the first word here, pode, pode, and the second, pode. Pode, closed, pode, open. Right? Changing in the grammar, which is a pretty big difference, but again, subtle difference in pronunciation. And lastly, the pair of people maybe most dear to us, grandpa and grandma, have also really similar pronunciations in Portuguese. Also similar in English, huh? Avô, avô, and avó. Open O for grandma, closed O for grandpa. One way to remember this, if you can, is to think of grandpa who wears a hat. Grandpa wears a hat. Now that you have that practice and you've acquired these skills, we can get to the more ridiculous side of pronunciation learning, which is crazy sentences that are ridiculous but are still really good for practice. So I thought of a couple phrases here that will be really good for pronouncing these differences. The first sentence here is eu sei seu céu. Eu sei seu céu. And if you look at the translation, I know, Mr. Sky. Something to practice on a daily basis. But just so you know that the difference between closed and open here, we have the first two, which are closed, no accent marks, but just so you know, eu sei, seu, and the last word, céu. Céu is kind of close to the word sell, as in sell your things. In English, just think of the L's as an U sound, céu. And second, we have the phrase, eu sou só o sol, which again is pretty stupid. I'm just the sun. Eu sou só o sol. Okay, the first one is closed, sou. The second word, só, is open. And the last word also open, sol. Eu sou só o sol. I'm just the son, man. I want to take a second just for those people who also speak Spanish. I know there's lots of people who learn Portuguese are also speakers of Spanish. And I think there's something important about that connection. One thing in particular about Spanish grammar, which is stem changing verbs, can really help you with something that we're talking about in this video, which is open and closed vowels. If you're familiar with stem changing verbs, it's that thing where sometimes the root of the verb that has an E changes to IE. For example, the Spanish word querer will change to, in the first person, quiero. And the word comenzar will change to comienzo. How is that important? Well, the Portuguese verbs that correspond to these verbs are going to have an open E sound, quero and começo. The same thing goes for the U to UE or O to UE stem changing verbs. For example, you have jugar, which will change to juego, and poder, which will change to puedo. How is this important? Well, these will change to open O's for their corresponding verbs in Portuguese. Jogo and posso. Jogo. Be careful that the word jogo with a closed O is the noun for game and the open O is the verb. We also have other examples of this. They don't have to be verbs necessarily. For example, the Spanish word fuego for fire is pronounced with an open O in Portuguese. Fogo. The same thing goes for the word ciego in Spanish. The word for blind is pronounced with an open E in Portuguese. Cego. The last thing that's the downside, I suppose, is that this doesn't work for nasalized vowels. So if it comes before an N or an M, sadly, this trick won't really help you. Last thing we have here is just some extra tips. So if you're ever in doubt, think about these things. They might help you. Open vowels, open E and open O, are always stressed, meaning they're loudest, they're longest, they have the stress of the word. Second, closed vowels are more common. So statistically, if you're just guessing, you have no idea, guess closed and odds are in your favor. The next one, nasalized vowels are also closed. You won't have an open vowel with nasalization. Again, more on that to come. The last thing, ask someone. Ask a friend, ask a professor to say a word again, to repeat the word, or maybe you know someone who's pretty educated with their native language and can tell you just open or closed. Hopefully by the end of this video, you'll already have acquired this ability to hear the difference between these open and closed sounds, and you can maybe figure it out for yourself. Something that you can be able to do now for the name of the legendary soccer player Pelé, to not call him Pele anymore. Pelé. But only in Portuguese. If you're speaking English, Pele away. Anyway, I hope this has helped you. I know you got this. It's just a matter of understanding these subtle differences, and happy practicing. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.